"Be quiet and just work," the millionaire snapped at the black maid. Yet, 5 minutes later, it was he who would be on his knees. The charity fundraiser at the upscale Manhattan hotel was in full swing. Crystal glasses chimed softly, polite laughter from celebrity guests, and New York's wealthiest entrepreneurs mingling in an atmosphere both opulent and distant. A dazzling chandelier hung from the high ceiling, its light reflecting off custom-tailored gowns and sleek designer suits. The air was perfumed with the delicate scent of roses and high-end colognes, blending into a perfect harmony. In one corner, a jazz band played mellow tunes, adding an elegant finish to the evening. Amid the powerful patrons sipping their expensive champagne moved Destiny Harris, a young black woman with natural curls and deep, expressive eyes, balancing a tray of hors d'oeuvres. Her crisp white uniform accentuated her smooth, dark skin as she stepped carefully between tables, keenly aware of each footfall so as not to disturb the distinguished guests. Destiny had worked part-time here for over a year. To her, every shift was a silent battle against fatigue and the occasional slur, sometimes unintentional, other times deliberate, from haughty patrons. Yet she never complained or reacted negatively. She knew her purpose. Every dollar she earned went toward her mother's mounting hospital bills. Martha Harris was fighting a life-threatening illness in a Brooklyn hospital, and Destiny's service shifts kept her in the fight. So she performed her duties meticulously, ignoring inquisitive stares and whispered comments aimed at her skin and background. At times, those looks made her feel invisible, like a nameless ghost slipping through the grandeur of the ballroom. But tonight felt different. An inexplicable thrill ran through her veins. This particular fundraiser drew America's top business leaders. The most talked-about figure was Harold Montgomery, the hard-edged real estate billionaire known for his cold arrogance. From the moment he arrived, the room felt eerily respectful, guests visibly recoiling at his imposing presence. Destiny kept her distance, hoping to avoid Montgomery's icy gaze. Yet fate sometimes plays its cruelest tricks. In a heartbeat that stretched into eternity, her heel caught on a loose patch of carpet as she passed Montgomery's table. The tray in her hand rocked, and a glass of deep red wine slipped off, shattering against Montgomery's expensive leather shoes. The sound of breaking glass ripped through the hush, the crimson liquid blooming like blood across polished leather, and suddenly every head turned. Destiny's heart pounded in her ears. She bent at the waist, whispering in panic, "I'm so sorry, Mr. Montgomery. I truly didn't mean to—" Her apology was cut off by Montgomery's icy roar. "What the hell is wrong with you? Are you blind? Or is this some kind of diversity hire stunt? Unacceptable." His words detonated like a bomb, obliterating the pretense of civility. Silence smothered the room as embarrassed guests glanced at one another, no one daring to speak up against the powerful tycoon. Destiny felt every pair of eyes on her. A cold sweat broke out along her hairline. She trembled, but forced herself to remain composed. Each racist insult cut into her dignity like a knife, yet she bit her lip, determined to keep from crying. Montgomery, still seething, sprang to his feet, face twisted in contempt. He stalked toward Destiny, voice lowered, but still loud enough for the room to hear every word. "You need to know your place. Someone like you should feel grateful just to be in this room, rather than ruining it for decent people." Murmurs rippled through the guests. The tension was so thick that even the jazz musician faltered on a note, the discordant sound echoing the night's unease. Across the room, an older black woman in a sleek black evening gown, Angela Coleman, narrowed her eyes at Montgomery. Her gaze was sharp, as if she were weighing her next move. Destiny stood frozen under the spotlight of attention, her body numb. She had never felt so small or powerless. Yet her mind was already on her mother in that hospital bed. She had to stay strong, no matter what. Little did she know that this fateful stumble would become a turning point not just in her life, but in Harold Montgomery's as well. In that instant, the elegant atmosphere of the banquet hall froze solid, and Destiny realized that every pair of distinguished eyes was focused on her like icy daggers. Yet among those dozens of gazes, one stood out, a pair of cold, gray eyes blazing with fury. Harold Montgomery's. Harold shot up from his plush leather chair, his rage erupting like an unpredictable storm. His face flushed crimson, jaw clenched as though he were fighting to contain some deep-seated fury. Veins stood out on his neck, a familiar sign to anyone who knew him. Harold Montgomery was not a man accustomed to being insulted or challenged, and tonight he had no intention of holding back. "What did you just do?" he practically snarled, his harsh voice slicing through the tense hush, making several guests jump in their seats. They glanced at one another awkwardly, wary of intervening. I am truly sorry, Mr. Montgomery. I tripped by accident." Destiny stammered, her voice trembling as she tried to mollify his wrath. Harold cut her off with a brusque wave. "Sorry? You think some half-hearted apology will wipe the wine off my $3,000 Italian leather shoes?" He advanced, his cold eyes sweeping over Destiny from head to toe in contempt. Each word he spoke was as sharp as a blade, squeezing the breath out of her chest. "I can't fathom why this hotel hires people like you, someone who can't even handle the basics and hides behind diversity quotas to survive," he bellowed, venom dripping from every syllable. A low murmur rippled through the room like a frosty wind, but no one dared speak up in her defense. Everyone knew Harold Montgomery's power and influence, and Destiny realized that nobody would risk crossing him, no matter how unjust his rage. "Look at you." He dropped his voice to a sneer, the volume lower but the cruelty magnified. "A clumsy, worthless nobody daring to serve people 100 times your class. You think a spotless white uniform makes you one of us?" Destiny stood frozen, head bowed, knuckles white as she clenched her hands. His words lashed her fragile self-worth like invisible whips. But he wasn't done. Harold turned to the guests, his mocking laughter dripping with malice. "Ladies and gentlemen, take note. This is why we must be careful about granting opportunities to the undeserving. They'll ruin everything we've built in the blink of an eye." A few forced, embarrassed laughs echoed around the room, but most guests averted their eyes, unwilling to look at Destiny. Her body went numb as memories of past slights and insults flooded back. But this public, vicious attack by a man of power felt like falling into a bottomless pit of helplessness. Then, without warning, Harold seized a plate of pasta from his table. A cruel challenge flickered in his eyes as he grinned. "If you can't do the job, let me teach you how to serve food." Before Destiny could even react, he slammed the plate onto her head. Streams of pasta and bright red sauce cascaded over her face, drenching her natural curls and soaking her pristine uniform. The hall went rigid with shock. No one dared to intervene. Destiny stood motionless, eyes closed, fighting back tears and humiliation. But Harold lingered, stepping back to admire his handiwork with a satisfied smirk. "Now, do you understand?" he whispered coldly, his voice icy yet impossible to ignore. "Here, you're nothing but a cheap decoration, a token this company parades around so people think they're doing their social responsibility. You don't belong here, and you never will." Destiny bit her lip until it bled, then straightened her posture with fierce pride, lifting her chin. Amid the curious, pitying stares and hushed jeers, she resolved that no one, especially Harold Montgomery, would ever see her break. From across the room, the enigmatic black woman in the elegant black gown, Angela Coleman, rose to her feet, her steely gaze locked onto Harold, and a determined smile curved her lips. In that moment, neither Destiny nor Harold could know that his tirade would not only shatter her dignity, but also set in motion the downfall of Harold Montgomery himself in the very near future. The moment that cold plate of pasta landed atop Destiny's head, the lavish atmosphere of the banquet hall shattered in a heartbeat that felt like forever. The sound of saucy noodles splattering onto her shoulders rang out unmistakably in the stunned silence. Every guest, renowned entrepreneurs, elegantly dressed socialites, stood frozen at the sight. Destiny remained motionless, as deep red sauce dripped from her natural curls down the sides of her temples and onto her smooth brown cheeks. She didn't wipe it away or fight back. She simply bit her lip to hold back the humiliation rising in her eyes. Inside, her heart felt like it was being pierced by 1,000 knives. But here, in front of this crowd, she refused to show weakness. Harold Montgomery took a few steps back, his cold, steely eyes fixed on Destiny with a cruel satisfaction, as if he'd just won a battle. The corners of his mouth curled into an arrogant half-smile, an expression of triumph. In Harold's mind, he was always the ruler of the room, and every act he committed only served to reinforce that power, even if it meant trampling someone else mercilessly. Whispers of concern rippled through the hall, but no one dared speak up. A few guests averted their eyes awkwardly, afraid of being drawn into this shameful spectacle. They all knew Harold Montgomery was not to be challenged. He was a towering figure in New York's elite, and no one wanted to face his icy wrath. Destiny stood tall, her body trembling with anger and humiliation, but her posture unbroken. Under the chandelier's glow, her large brown eyes sparkled with fierce pride, a determination not to yield to Harold's public disgrace. She reminded herself that if she allowed even a moment of defeat to show, she would lose the one thing she had left, her dignity. From the dimly lit corner, Angela Coleman watched silently, her sharp gaze never leaving Destiny. No one knew that Angela wasn't just another distinguished guest. She sat on Harold Montgomery's company board. For months, she had quietly observed every one of his moves, every word, every abuse of power, especially his racist, authoritarian treatment of employees. Angela wasn't one to wear her emotions on her sleeve, but now a cold fury swelled within her. She understood Destiny's pain all too well. Angela herself had once been a black woman navigating the ruthless world of powerful tycoons. Yet instead of storming the stage, Angela held her rage at bay, continuing to observe Harold. She wanted to witness the full extent of his arrogance and malice, ensuring he couldn't wriggle free from consequences this time. In her hand, her phone was already recording every detail, evidence she planned to use to end Harold's reign of cruelty and hypocrisy. Sensing all eyes on him, Harold turned to the guests with a mock apologetic gesture. "My apologies, everyone. I truly didn't mean to ruin the evening. But sometimes we need to teach certain people their place." He spoke solemnly, yet his eyes glittered with dangerous delight. In that moment, Harold reveled in his absolute authority as everyone trembled at his words and actions. A few guests forced polite chuckles, not out of agreement, but from fear of offending the most powerful man in the room. Most, however, remained silent and uneasy, too intimidated to defend the poor server publicly humiliated at their table. Destiny glanced at Harold once more, her heart still aching with fresh wounds. She saw in him a man using her as a prop to flaunt his wealth and dominance before all these spectators. Harold slowly wiped his hands on a white silk napkin, as though he'd touched something filthy. A few nearby guests shivered, but none looked his way. Destiny remained composed, hands clenched at her sides, silent. Though a storm raged inside her, she knew this wasn't the moment to explode. She needed to weather it with every ounce of calm she could muster. Finally, Angela Coleman rose with quiet resolve. Her steady, powerful gaze locked on Harold. She knew she could no longer sit still another second. With unwavering determination, she stepped out of the hall, phone in one hand, the other pressed lightly to her heart, the very seat of her burning desire for justice. Destiny had no idea that the moment Angela walked away, both her fate and Harold Montgomery's had turned a new page, one where every hidden sin would soon be laid bare. The moment the banquet room door quietly closed behind Angela Coleman, the murmurs inside faded into nothing, leaving the hotel corridor in icy silence. Angela paused, sliding her back against the elegant damask wallpaper, and took a deep breath to steady her racing heart. The image of Destiny Harris standing tall and unbroken, despite Harold Montgomery's brutal humiliation, was etched in her mind, strengthening her resolve for what she was about to do. Angela was the first black woman ever to hold a key seat on Montgomery Corporation's board, a powerhouse real estate empire founded by Harold's own family. In that role, she embodied proof that women, especially black women, could shatter every barrier and reach the highest levels of power. But she also knew that behind every gilded success lay hidden trials and a price paid. She understood that in Harold's eyes her position wasn't an achievement to respect, but merely a strategic concession to diversity. So from the day she joined the board, Angela set a clear goal: to monitor and gather irrefutable evidence of Harold Montgomery's racism and abuses of power, to ensure a genuinely fair and equal workplace for every employee in the company, and to do that, she had to move quietly and deliberately. For months, Angela had received countless anonymous reports from employees under Harold, mostly people of color. Their stories were eerily consistent: subtle slurs, discriminatory promotion, and pay decisions, even outright insults like the one Harold just hurled at Destiny. Yet Angela never had concrete proof to bring before the board. Harold was too shrewd, hiding his true nature behind a polished veneer of civility and untouchable authority. Until tonight. Clicking along in her heels down the corridor, her long black evening gown swishing softly, Angela slipped into a shadowy alcove and pulled out her phone. She opened a secure app to check the final feed from the concealed cameras she'd had installed in the banquet room. Camera angles that captured every action, every hateful word, every scornful look Harold gave Destiny. The footage was crystal clear, undeniable evidence that would strip away any of his denials and force serious consequences. Angela allowed herself a bitter smile, not one of joy, but of grim satisfaction at having witnessed yet another injustice. For her, Destiny Harris's ordeal was the last straw. It was time Harold understood that power wielded to trample others carried a price. She tapped Save on the video, then dialed James Whitaker, chairman of the board, a man she fully trusted to uphold justice. The line rang twice before his calm, deep voice answered, "Angela, everything okay? I thought you were at the charity gala with Harold tonight." Angela inhaled, then spoke slowly and resolutely. "James, we can't wait any longer. I have all the proof of Harold Montgomery's racism and abuse of power. What just happened to Destiny Harris is unacceptable, and I believe the board will act immediately once they see this footage." A few seconds of silence, then James's tone grew grave. "That's serious," Angela answered without hesitation. "Very." Harold crossed every line. "We can't keep excusing him. The company's reputation is at stake, and more importantly, employees are suffering. The board must take decisive action now." A heavy sigh on the other end, then James replied firmly, "I understand, Angela. I'll call an emergency meeting right away. Prepare your evidence." Angela gently hung up, her eyes flashing with unwavering determination. Her heart was clear. She would see this fight through, not only for Destiny Harris, but for the hundreds of other employees silently enduring Harold's tyranny. She knew it would be the toughest battle of her career, but it was worth every risk. Adjusting her posture, Angela turned back toward the banquet room. Before re-entering, she reviewed the video one last time, her gaze steely. In her mind, only one thought rang out. "Harold Montgomery, you've made the biggest mistake of your life. Now you'll pay for everything you've done." With that conviction, Angela Coleman pushed the door open and stepped back into the gala, knowing that her next move would change not only Harold's fate, but Destiny Harris's life forever. While Angela Coleman readied herself to step into the most important fight of her career beyond the banquet room door, elsewhere, down quieter corridors and behind closed doors, Destiny Harris sat curled up in the staff changing room. The cramped, dimly lit space was only illuminated by a single, flickering neon light overhead. Though Destiny knew this room well, tonight it felt uncharacteristically cold and alien. She sat motionless on an old wooden chair in the corner, her pristine white uniform splattered with damp red pasta sauce that clung unpleasantly to her skin. Destiny made no effort to wipe away the stains. They were the clearest proof of the humiliation she'd just endured. A wound unseen, but 1,000 times more painful than any physical injury. In her mind, Harold Montgomery's every word and gesture of contempt replayed on a loop, like a broken tape that wouldn't stop. Each phrase felt like a knife twisting in her battered self-worth. "You think a clean white uniform makes you one of us?" That sentence echoed relentlessly, driving Destiny to close her eyes against the sting of tears threatening to spill from her reddened lashes. The harder she fought her emotions, the deeper Harold's insults seemed to carve into her spirit. Suddenly, childhood memories flooded back with vivid clarity. She remembered being the only black child in class, the wary glances and derisive jokes whenever she raised her hand, the cruel taunts about her skin and her family's poverty. She'd once thought maturity would steel her against such cruelty, but now she realized that no matter how many years passed, those invisible scars never truly healed. They only waited for a moment like tonight to rage anew. Destiny glanced around the worn changing room, each detail stirring more recollections. She thought of her mother, Martha Harris, the strongest woman she'd ever known, who had always taught her to hold her head high, live with dignity, and never let anyone diminish her true worth. Even from her hospital bed, battling a life-threatening illness, Mrs. Harris had reminded Destiny that she deserved respect and every good thing life could offer. At that thought, a strange surge of strength welled inside Destiny, as if her mother's spirit stood beside her, urging her to rise, not with tears, but with the pride and resilience that had always been part of her. Destiny inhaled deeply, then stood and walked to the small, aged mirror mounted on the wall. She studied her reflection. A young woman with pasta-streaked curls, a smeared face and tear-glazed eyes. But now she saw something new, Not weakness, but an iron-clad resolve. "No," Destiny whispered to herself, her voice small but unwavering. "I won't let him, or anyone, define my worth. I won't let him win." It was the first moment since she'd left the banquet room that her hands stopped trembling. Confidence and pride flooded back. She reached for a clean towel hanging nearby and carefully wiped the sauce from her face and hair. With each gentle swipe, she felt pieces of her life snap back into her control. Just then, the changing room door eased open, and a familiar figure slipped inside. Emily Brooks, the kind co-worker who had always watched out for Destiny since her first day on the job. "Destiny," Emily said softly, her voice laced with concern. "I heard what happened. Are you okay?" Destiny turned to Emily and gave a small nod. "I'm fine, Emily, really. It's just—" She paused, gathering her thoughts, then continued in a steadier tone. "I can't keep bowing my head and enduring this. I don't deserve to be treated like that." Emily met her gaze with warmth and understanding, gently taking Destiny's hand. "You're right, you deserve so much better. And you know what? This might finally be different. I just saw Angela Coleman talking very seriously with the leadership. Something big is happening. I believe Harold Montgomery won't be able to dodge accountability this time." Destiny's heart gave a hopeful flutter at the mention of Angela Coleman. Whatever would come next, Destiny knew she would face it with her head held high, fortified by self-respect and faith in her own worth. She managed a small, determined smile, squeezed Emily's hand in silent thanks, and once more looked into the mirror, ready to return to the world with the fiercest pride she'd ever known. While Destiny stood before the small mirror, reclaiming her strength and dignity, one floor above in the hotel, Angela Coleman was steeling herself for the fiercest battle of her career since joining Montgomery Corporation's board. The large conference room was meticulously appointed. A gleaming walnut table stretched its length, reflecting the tense expressions of the company's most powerful figures. As Angela entered, her sharp gaze swept over every board member in the room. At the head of the table sat James Whitaker, the board chairman, meeting Angela's eyes with understanding and cautious reserve. Seated beside him were long-serving directors, most of whom owed their loyalty or careers to Harold Montgomery. Angela knew this would not be an easy fight. Harold Montgomery was not only the company's formidable CEO, but also the founder's son. He'd woven an intricate web of power, with vast financial and political ties. To confront Harold was to risk her career and reputation, but it was a risk she had to take. The emergency meeting was called without delay, and Angela wasted no time. She rose and walked confidently to the front of the board, her presence commanding. The room's tension ratcheted higher the moment she began to outline Harold Montgomery's misconduct and racial discrimination. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began in a calm but resolute tone, "what I am about to present may make you uncomfortable, but I believe that truth is essential to our company's sustainable success." A few directors exchanged skeptical glances, and one or two showed visible irritation at the unscheduled meeting. Thomas Sheffield, an old friend of Harold's, spoke up immediately. "Angela, I hope you understand how serious these allegations are. Harold has been an effective leader and the driving force behind our market dominance." Angela met Thomas's gaze without hesitation. "I agree, Thomas, which is precisely why I've asked you all to witness the evidence I've gathered." Without another word, she activated the large projection screen at the front of the room. She connected her device and cued the secretly recorded footage from the banquet room cameras. As the video began, a suffocating silence fell over the board. crystal clear images played. Harold Montgomery rising in a rage, his eyes full of scorn as he berated Destiny Harris with racial slurs and cruel insults before all the guests. The climax showed him dumping a plate of cold pasta onto her head, then grinning wickedly at her humiliation. Harold's voice rang out through the room's high-fidelity audio system. "You think a clean white uniform makes you one of us? You're nothing more than cheap decoration." When the video ended, the room remained eerily silent. Shock, anger, and deep disappointment were etched on every face. Angela turned slowly to face them, her voice low but razor-sharp. "You have just witnessed conduct I cannot and will not tolerate." This was not an isolated incident, but clear evidence of Harold Montgomery's repeated racism and abuse of power. Can we really continue to look the other way and allow behavior like this in our company? After a long pause, James Whitaker was the first to break the silence. "What we've just seen is inexcusable, but I'm aware that some here may still have doubts. Does anyone wish to defend Harold's actions?" All eyes turned to Thomas Sheffield, who now looked neither confident nor defiant. His face showed shame and embarrassment, and he quietly shook his head. "I have nothing to say. There's no justification for this." Angela surveyed the directors, her tone growing even firmer. "We face a difficult but necessary decision. If we ignore today's revelations, we condone discrimination and betray the values we claim to uphold. This isn't just an ethical issue. It's about our reputation and our future." At last, James Whitaker nodded decisively. "I agree with Angela. We must act immediately. Harold Montgomery will be suspended pending a full investigation. I move that we take this to a vote right now." Angela allowed herself a brief, relieved smile, knowing the real battle was only beginning. But now, Harold Montgomery could no longer hide behind his power, because the true cost of power is transparency and justice, both of which he had long neglected. Just after the board approved Harold Montgomery's suspension, Angela Coleman and Chairman James Whitaker wasted no time. Side by side, they strode down the gleaming hallway toward the banquet room. Angela's heels clicked with determined purpose, every step echoing her iron resolve to confront Harold openly and without mercy. Inside the banquet room, Harold Montgomery laughed confidently among his circle of close associates, utterly unaware of what had just transpired upstairs. He raised his glass of wine, boasting of the company's upcoming million-dollar projects and its meteoric growth under his leadership, oblivious to the uneasy glances from guests still unsettled by the earlier incident with Destiny Harris. Harold prided himself on his intelligence and power, and his arrogance. In his mind, his position was untouchable. He believed that no matter how serious the issue, he could quash it with his wealth, influence, and extensive networks. He saw people like Destiny Harris and even Angela Coleman as mere pawns, incapable of threatening the empire he had spent years building. But at the very moment he lifted his glass, the banquet room doors burst open, drawing every head in the room. The murmur of conversation and laughter died instantly as all eyes turned to the entrance. Angela Coleman entered, her expression stern, gaze unwaveringly strong, flanked by Chairman James Whitaker, his normally composed face now set in rare steel. Behind them stood two other board members, their serious expressions challenging Harold's very presence. Realizing something was amiss, Harold forced a polite smile and strode forward. "Angela, James, so glad you've joined us. We were just discussing some exciting new projects. Care to weigh in?" Angela ignored his greeting. She fixed him with a cold stare, and, her voice cutting through the stunned silence, said, "Harold, I'm afraid the most important discussion tonight isn't about any million-dollar plans, but about the utterly unacceptable conduct you displayed in this very room." The tension snapped taut. Guests exchanged confused, uneasy looks as the gravity of the situation sank in. Harold's smile vanished, replaced by a guarded glare. "I don't know what you mean, Angela," he said slowly, striving for calm. "Surely you're mistaken." James Whitaker stepped forward, his voice decisive and unyielding. "There's no mistake, Harold. The board has met in emergency session and just voted to suspend you immediately, pending investigation for the racist abuse of power you demonstrated toward Destiny Harris." Harold felt his heart skip a beat, but quickly masked his shock with arrogance. "Suspended? You must be joking. I run this company. No one on this board can make that decision without my approval." Angela calmly produced her device and tapped the screen. Her tone was icy and resolute. "Then allow me to show you, and everyone here, just how far you crossed the line today." Again, the hidden banquet room footage played, Harold's racist insults and cruel mockery of Destiny, culminating in him dumping a cold plate of pasta onto her head as she stood defenseless. The room, once filled with chatter and clinking glasses, fell utterly silent. Guests looked at Harold with disappointment, anger, and horror. Harold stood frozen, eyes wide as the screen replayed his own vicious actions. A cold sweat formed on his temples. For the first time, Harold Montgomery realized that his once untouchable power was collapsing before him. Angela turned to him, her voice ringing through the stillness. "Power demands responsibility and dignity, Harold. And sadly, you have long forgotten that. Now it's time you face the consequences of your actions." Her words sounded like a public verdict, sealing the end of Harold's reign of cruelty. In that moment, he understood that his era had truly ended, and that everything he'd built on arrogance and oppression lay in ruins before the eyes of all. In the vast banquet hall now plunged into absolute silence, Harold Montgomery stood motionless, his eyes fixed on the footage playing before him, shameful proof of his own behavior. His usual confidence and poise had vanished, replaced by a pale complexion and a wild, furious look, like a cornered animal. Angela Coleman met his gaze coldly, then glanced toward Carol Davis, the manager directly responsible for Destiny, who was standing near the banquet room door, her face etched with worry and sympathy. Angela gave a slight nod. Carol understood instantly and slipped out of the room. Moments later, the banquet room doors opened again, and Destiny Harris herself stepped back inside. At the very instant she appeared, every guest turned to watch. Destiny walked forward slowly but with unshakable resolve, head held high, shoulders square, a stark contrast to the humiliated waitress from minutes before. Though faint pasta stains still marred her white uniform, it hardly mattered now. In everyone's eyes, Destiny embodied self-respect and inner strength. Seeing her return, Harold blurted out, voice thick with hatred and disbelief, "What is she doing here? Who let her back in?" Before he could say more, Angela strode forward and stood between him and Destiny, her tone steel-cold and uncompromising. "Quiet, Harold. You have no right to speak or give orders here anymore. Destiny was invited back because you are the one who needs to face her and be held accountable for everything you've done." Angela's words rang out through the hall, delivered with such force that Harold felt as if his arrogance had been struck down. For the first time in his life, he sensed true powerlessness as authority slipped from his grasp into the hands of a woman he had long dismissed. Destiny halted at a respectful distance, her gaze steady on Harold. Though pain still lingered, she no longer trembled. She realized she was not alone. Angela, Chairman Whitaker, and the silent solidarity of the assembled guests stood with her now, trying to reclaim some control. Harold's voice quavered, even as he clung to his pride. "Don't think this one little mistake gives you the right to lecture me. You're nobody, Destiny Harris, nobody." His words were cut off by Angela's authoritative warning. "Mr. Montgomery, I suggest you choose your words carefully. Everything you say here is being recorded and will serve as evidence before the board, and in court if necessary." Angela's icy stare silenced him. For the first time, Harold truly felt fear creep into his heart. Turning to Destiny, Angela's expression softened, but her resolve remained rock solid. "Destiny, I asked you to return because I want you to know that this time, justice and truth are on your side. We, the board of directors, will not tolerate racism or abuse of power in any form, no matter who commits it." Destiny nodded gratefully, then looked once more at Harold. This time, her voice was calm, clear, and unwavering. "Mr. Montgomery, I'm not here to lecture you. I'm here to show you that no matter how far you tried to tear me down, in the end, you are the one who must face the shameful truth about yourself." Her words echoed with undeniable strength. Harold tried to avoid her gaze, but couldn't. He felt small and powerless before the dignity and moral authority of a woman he had cruelly underestimated. Angela stepped beside Destiny, placing a protective hand on her shoulder, then faced Harold again with a verdict as cold and final as steel. "Harold Montgomery, you are unfit to lead this company any longer. We will begin formal proceedings, and you will face all legal and ethical consequences for your disgraceful actions." Angela's declaration marked the end of Harold's unchecked reign. In that moment, he realized everything he had built on cruelty and arrogance lay in ruin. Not because of some grand conspiracy, but because he had forfeited the very principles of respect and responsibility that true power demands. Meanwhile, Destiny stood quietly beside Angela, feeling for the first time in her life the true power of justice, dignity, and self-respect aligning at her back. In the instant Angela Coleman delivered her icy declaration, like a final verdict against Harold Montgomery, the banquet hall fell into absolute silence. Harold felt every gaze upon him, every heavy breath from the guests, not looks of awe or fear as before, but pure disappointment, contempt, and deep pity. It was a moment he had never imagined. He, once wielding supreme power, now stood utterly alone and desperate in this familiar room. His mind reeled, fear and panic surging like freezing water within him. Everything he'd once considered eternal, power, reputation, wealth, seemed to dissolve in an instant. Yet, even in his terror, Harold clung to a final glimmer of hope. He believed there was only one way to salvage the situation: if Destiny Harris would forgive him and withdraw her complaint. But was that even possible? He couldn't be sure. In utter despair, Harold took a shaky step toward Destiny. His legs wobbled. His usual confidence was gone. Destiny met his advance with calm eyes, still bearing the marks of his earlier cruelty. Harold's throat went dry. Each word weighed on him as he forced out a trembling apology. "Destiny, I am sorry." His voice fell away, unsteady and weak, as though spoken by a man far from the powerful figure he once was. The hall grew heavier with silence. No one dared to speak, all eyes fixed on his every movement. "I truly didn't know what I was doing," Harold continued, his voice cracking under strain, panic in his eyes as he searched for sympathy, only to find cold, distant stares. "Please forgive me, Destiny. I never meant to hurt you. It was all a misunderstanding, a moment of lost control. But Destiny remained motionless, her face unreadable to his feeble apology. She stared at him with those deep, steady eyes, now free of anger but filled with a distant sadness and unshakable resolve. Then, in a gesture nobody expected, Harold collapsed, dropping to his knees before Destiny. A gasp rippled through the room. No one could have imagined the proud, powerful Harold Montgomery humiliating himself so completely. "I beg you, Destiny," Harold sobbed, tasting true shame for the first time. "Please forgive me. I will do anything to atone. Don't let this go any further. I'll lose everything." Destiny looked down at the man who had used his power to crush her dignity. In that moment, she saw that his apology stemmed not from genuine remorse, but from fear. Fear of losing power and reputation. She understood that if he escaped consequences today, more innocent people would suffer under his tyranny in the future. She inhaled deeply, lifting her gaze to him with unwavering conviction. "Mr. Montgomery, I cannot accept this apology," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I know it comes from fear, not sincerity. I'm not seeking revenge, but I demand justice. You must answer to the law and to everyone you've hurt." Her words rang through the hall like an uncompromising verdict. Harold's panic-stricken eyes darted around, realizing for the first time that he had lost everything: power, prestige, trust, and respect he once took for granted. Angela stepped beside Destiny, placing a steady, reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Destiny is right, Harold. This is no longer a personal matter. Montgomery Corporation will not tolerate any form of racism or abuse of power, regardless of who commits it. You will face the full weight of the law for your disgraceful actions." Harold remained kneeling, head bowed, utterly defeated. Whispers swelled among the guests, their looks of scorn and disappointment intensifying. Never before had Harold felt so alone, powerless and humiliated. In that moment he finally understood. The power he believed invincible was fragile, and now it was too late for him to undo his wrongdoing. As for Destiny, she was no longer the meek, crushed girl he once spat upon. This moment had transformed her. Destiny now knew her true worth. That self-respect, dignity, and justice are the real power no one can take away. The moment Harold Montgomery collapsed to his knees, begging for Destiny Harris's forgiveness, all of New York City seemed to hold its breath. Everyone at the gala knew they had witnessed an event that would send shockwaves far beyond the glittering walls of the Manhattan Hotel, into boardrooms, newsrooms, and social media feeds across the city. By dawn, before the sun had fully chased the night from the busy streets, every major New York newspaper had splashed the story across its front page with bold, unflinching headlines exposing Harold's racist abuse of power at the charity fundraiser. Real estate tycoon Harold Montgomery suspended over racism scandal at fundraiser. The New York Times banner read, recounting in vivid detail the footage Angela Coleman had released. Harold's scornful insults, the cold plate of pasta dumped on Destiny's head, and his desperate, unconvincing apology on his knees. Public outrage was immediate and fierce. Within hours, the scandal trended across all social media platforms. Angry posts poured in, denouncing Harold and criticizing the silence of business leaders who once admired him. Longtime clients and partners of the Montgomery Corporation publicly expressed their disappointment and announced they were reevaluating their partnerships. Under mounting pressure from the public and the press, the Montgomery Corporation Board issued an unequivocal statement that very day. Montgomery Corporation cannot and will not tolerate any form of racism or abuse of power, regardless of the individual's position. Effective immediately, Harold Montgomery is dismissed from all corporate roles and will no longer represent the company in any capacity. We will fully cooperate with legal authorities to investigate this matter and ensure that justice is served fairly." That declaration struck the final blow to Harold's career, obliterating any hope he had of salvaging his reputation, rotten long ago from arrogance and tyranny. In a single night, Harold Montgomery, the once dominant force in New York real estate, lost everything he held dear: prestige, power, and the respect he once took for granted, leaving only humiliation and utter solitude. Back in his opulent Upper East Side mansion, Harold sat alone in his vast living room, surrounded by newspapers filled with scathing headlines. He realized he had no one left to turn to, no friends, no colleagues, no partners. Those who once fawned over him now recoiled, treating him like a toxic liability. Across town, in a small room at Brooklyn Hospital, Destiny Harris sat beside her mother, Martha. For the first time, she felt a profound peace and pride. In the days since the gala, she had endured the full spectrum of human emotion, from humiliation and fear to triumph and courage. And now, she saw that every painful moment had been worth it, because justice had prevailed. On the small TV in her hospital room, news segments repeatedly replayed Destiny's composed, proud stance. No longer the humiliated waitress, but a young woman who had stood up to injustice and racism. Reporters hailed her as a symbol of courage and social justice, celebrating her dignity and inner strength. Destiny's phone buzzed nonstop with messages of support from strangers, civil rights organizations, and equality advocates nationwide. She never imagined she'd one day become a beacon of hope and inspiration for others who had faced similar indignities. Deep in her heart, Destiny understood that her victory was larger than herself. It was a meaningful stride toward justice and equality for all who had been mistreated. That afternoon, Angela Coleman visited Destiny at the hospital. Her eyes shone with pride and respect as she squeezed Destiny's hand and said warmly, "Destiny, you have shown the greatest courage I have ever witnessed. Always remember that true power lies in justice, equality, and dignity. No force on earth can match them." Destiny nodded, a serene smile on her lips. For the first time in years, she no longer feared the future. She knew her fight for justice was only beginning, and now she was not alone. She had become the voice for those who could not speak, an inspiration for change. As for Harold, he finally understood that true power does not come from money, status, or intimidation, but from the respect and trust of others. Tragically, he learned that lesson when it was far too late. After the turbulent days, as the public uproar over Harold Montgomery's scandal began to fade, Destiny Harris's life slowly returned to a normal rhythm. But this time, she was no longer just a faceless girl among New York's bustling crowds. Deep in her heart, a fierce flame burned, urging her to do something so that no one else would ever have to endure what she had suffered. That afternoon, as Destiny packed up the last of her personal items at the Manhattan Hotel, closing the bitterest chapter of her life, she received an unexpected call from Angela Coleman. Angela's warm, caring voice on the other end brought Destiny a wave of relief. "Destiny, do you have a moment? There's something important I'd like to talk to you about." Destiny agreed immediately, and less than an hour later the two women were seated across from each other in a quiet little cafe on a street near the hotel. Soft afternoon sunlight filtered through the window panes, illuminating Angela's resolute, intelligent face. Destiny felt safe sitting opposite the woman who had stood by her through her darkest moments and helped her rediscover her own worth. Stirring her coffee gently, Angela looked at Destiny with affection but also seriousness. After a thoughtful pause, she spoke. "Destiny, I know these past days have been anything but easy. But what you did, your courage, your steadfastness, the pride you displayed, has had far greater impact than you can imagine. Many people now see you as a symbol of bravery and justice, and that's no small thing." Destiny offered a humble smile, her eyes shining with a new hope. "Thank you, Angela," she replied softly. "I was only doing what I thought was right." Angela nodded, fully understanding Destiny's humility. But she also knew that Destiny now wielded a special kind of power, not from a title or wealth, but from the respect and trust of the community. She continued in a more grave tone, "Because of that, I wanted to meet with you, not just to express our gratitude, but to propose something important. As you know, Montgomery Corporation is at a critical juncture. We want to rebuild the trust and reputation Harold Montgomery shattered. To achieve this, we're forming a special council on anti-discrimination and employee rights." Pausing to let the weight of her words register, Angela locked eyes with Destiny to ensure she understood the significance of her offer. "We'd like to invite you to become an official member of that council. Destiny, your presence would not just be symbolic. It would give voice to those who are most vulnerable, those who may still be suffering in silence." Destiny was stunned into silence for a few moments. She had never imagined such an offer, an opportunity not only to protect herself, but to safeguard and empower countless others. Her heart raced, moved by the gravity of the moment. Finally she spoke, her voice trembling but resolute. "Angela, I'm truly honored that you thought of me for this role. I understand the tremendous responsibility it carries, and I'm ready. I don't want anyone else to go through what I did." A satisfied smile lit Angela's face as she took Destiny's hand, her tone both gentle and powerful. "I'm so glad you'll do this, Destiny. I believe that with your inner strength and dignity, you'll excel in this role. Our council will bring about real change, and I'm confident great things lie ahead." Their meeting ended on a note of optimism and hope. As Destiny left the cafe and stepped back onto the familiar streets of the city, her heart swelled with pride and determination. For the first time in years, she felt she was walking a path truly her own. A path not only for herself, but in service of fairness and dignity for all. As for Harold Montgomery, in the days that followed, he seemed to vanish from the glamorous world he once commanded. Facing official legal inquiries and corporate censure, he came to deeply feel the consequences of the mistakes he had once dismissed. He realized there was no road back to the position he had lost. No friends, no colleagues, not even family to lean on. Dark loneliness and disappointment engulfed his life like a relentless storm. Meanwhile, Destiny Harris moved forward into a new chapter of her life, embracing responsibilities and a power she had never imagined. She now understood her true purpose: to defend justice and dignity for everyone in need of a voice, and she knew that her journey was only just beginning. As Destiny Harris confidently stepped into a future full of promise, becoming a symbol of strength and dignity for so many, Harold Montgomery was sliding into profound isolation and despair. Never in his life had he felt so lost and powerless. All the power, prestige, and influence he had painstakingly built had vanished like a sandcastle swept away by the tide, leaving him with emptiness and bitter regret. The grand mansion he once proudly called home now felt cold and deserted. Friends, colleagues, and partners who had once flocked to his side were nowhere to be found. His phone, once flooded with calls of respect, now sat silent and useless on his expensive desk. Harold sat curled on a huge leather armchair, staring into space as his mind churned with unanswerable questions. For the first time, Harold had to look himself in the mirror without evasion. His eyes, once alight with arrogance and self-assurance, now reflected only fatigue, sorrow, and profound remorse. He realized that for years he had lived in a hollow world, one where respect was earned not by integrity or kindness, but by power, money, and instilling fear. Deep down, Harold had always believed true strength lay in controlling others, in bending them to his will. He never imagined that power could be so fragile, and that in an instant he could lose it all. The harsh words he once hurled at Destiny Harris and countless others echoed in his mind, a merciless indictment reminding him of the consequences he now faced. In a moment of agonized clarity, Harold recalled the banquet scene when he fell to his knees, begging Destiny for forgiveness. He had thought an apology could fix everything, that Destiny would relent, accept his remorse, and all would go back to normal. But remembering the steely, cold resolve in her eyes, he finally understood that genuine forgiveness couldn't be bought with empty words or feigned tears. It could only come from true repentance, something he had never fully felt before. Harold rose and shuffled toward the towering bookshelf at the far end of the room. He glanced at dusty framed photos, prestigious awards and certificates, once sources of immense pride, now meaningless relics. He picked up an old photograph of himself with his father, the founder of Montgomery Corporation, who had always taught him about integrity and respecting others. His heart tightened at the realization that he had betrayed every value his father had tried to instill. Overcome by despair and self-reproach, Harold sat back at his desk, booted up his computer, and began reading article after article and social media post about himself. He saw the anger, disappointment, and disgust directed at him. For the first time, he truly grasped what it felt like to be judged, to be ostracized, to be utterly cut off from society. And beneath it all, he knew he deserved every bit of it. Sitting alone in the darkness, Harold thought of everyone he had hurt, the staff he had unjustly berated, the colleagues he'd used and discarded, and especially Destiny Harris, the brave young woman who had taught him his greatest lesson. He realized that true treasures like respect and trust couldn't be bought with money or power. They were built only through sincerity, humility, and kindness, qualities he had never valued until now. Harold placed a hand over his heart, feeling the emptiness deep within. He wondered if he could ever make amends for the wrongs he had done. Perhaps it was too late to reverse the damage, but he knew he had to begin facing his failures with honesty and seriousness. In the hush of the room, he reached for paper and pen and began drafting a letter to Destiny. This would not be another hollow, self-serving apology. It would be a sincere confession filled with genuine remorse. He wrote that he deeply recognized all his mistakes, and while he didn't expect her forgiveness, he wanted her to know that her strength and dignity had opened his eyes to life's true values. Carefully sealing the letter in an envelope, Harold felt a sense of relief and peace, knowing he could finally be honest with himself. For the first time in years, he no longer needed to hide behind a mask of power and pride. In that moment, Harold Montgomery realized that although he had lost every shred of fame, status, and wealth, he had gained something far more valuable: a chance to become a better person, to face his conscience and to take responsibility for his actions. Now, though the road ahead remained uncertain and challenging, Harold was ready to move forward, not as the powerful man he once aspired to be, but as an ordinary individual seeking true forgiveness and inner peace. After the storm of public outrage over Harold Montgomery's scandal finally began to subside, Destiny Harris's life settled back into a normal rhythm, but she was no longer an anonymous face lost in New York's crowd. Deep in her heart, a powerful flame burned, pushing her to help others never have to endure what she had. That afternoon, as Destiny was clearing out her last personal belongings at the Manhattan Hotel, closing the bittersweet chapter of her past, she received an unexpected call from Angela Coleman. Angela's warm, caring voice eased Destiny's spirit. "Destiny, do you have a moment? I'd like to talk to you about something important." Destiny agreed without hesitation, and less than an hour later they were seated across from each other in a quiet little cafe down the street. Golden afternoon light filtered through the windows, illuminating Angela's determined, intelligent face. Fate felt right. The woman who had stood by her when she needed it most was now offering her the chance to make an even bigger difference. Angela stirred her coffee thoughtfully, then said, "Destiny, I know these past days haven't been easy, but what you did, your courage, your steadfastness, your pride, has resonated more widely than you might imagine. You've become a symbol of bravery and justice for countless people." Destiny smiled humbly, her eyes bright with hope. "Thank you, Angela. I only did what I believed was right." Angela nodded. "Precisely. And that's why I'm here, not just to thank you, but to ask you something important. Montgomery Corporation is at a pivotal crossroads. We need to rebuild the trust and reputation that Harold Montgomery shattered. To do that, we're creating a special council on anti-discrimination and employee rights." She paused to ensure Destiny understood the gravity of her words. "We'd like to invite you to serve on that council. Your presence won't just be symbolic. It will give a real voice to those who are most vulnerable, those who may still be suffering in silence." Destiny was speechless for a moment, overwhelmed by the opportunity. Finally, she said, her voice trembling yet resolute, "Angela, I'm truly honored you'd think of me. I understand the responsibility this role carries, and I accept. I don't want anyone else to go through what I did." A satisfied smile crossed Angela's face as she took Destiny's hand. "I'm so glad you'll do this. With your inner strength and dignity, I know you'll excel. Our council will drive real change, and I believe wonderful things lie ahead." They left the cafe that afternoon filled with optimism and resolve. As Destiny walked back along the city streets she knew so well, pride and determination filled her heart. For the first time in years, she felt she was truly on her own path. A path not just for herself, but for justice and dignity for all. As for Harold Montgomery, in the weeks that followed, he seemed to vanish from the glamorous world he once ruled. Facing legal proceedings and corporate sanctions, he came to deeply feel the consequences of his past arrogance. There would be no return to power, no friends, no colleagues, no family to lean on, only a lonely reckoning with his own failures. Meanwhile, Destiny Harris moved forward into her new role with clarity of purpose. Each day, her story inspired thousands, ordinary employees, young people grappling with social prejudice, even corporate leaders beginning to grasp their own responsibilities. Angela Coleman remained by her side, proud of the strength Destiny had discovered through her ordeal, and grateful for the way she had awakened an entire community to the fact that no one should suffer injustice in silence. Over time, Montgomery Corporation itself transformed into a new model of corporate culture, one where respect, dignity, and equality were not just slogans, but values lived in every decision and action. And whenever people spoke of that change, they remembered Destiny Harris, the once humble maid who stood up to racism and abuse of power, opening a meaningful new chapter for everyone. Harold, for his part, never regained his former status, but he came to realize that the truest values in life aren't power or money. After fully facing legal and ethical consequences, he chose to devote his remaining years to charity, quietly helping those he had once scorned. He never forgot Destiny's lesson, that dignity and respect are the only true treasures money cannot buy. Years later, when people recall this remarkable story, Destiny Harris's name still shines as a beacon of spiritual strength and moral courage. Her journey became the shared story of countless people who had faced injustice and discrimination, reminding everyone that power and wealth can never replace self-respect, human dignity, and mutual respect. The story closes in the gentle glow of an afternoon sun, with Destiny standing before a crowd at a human rights conference. Her voice rings out, clear and full of passion. No one among us should remain silent in the face of injustice or discrimination. Every one of us, no matter who we are, deserves respect and fair treatment, and those values cannot be exchanged for anything else, not power, not money, but dignity and respect among us all. A standing ovation follows. In the eyes of her audience, you could see admiration, gratitude, and a new hope that the world can become a better place if each of us dares to stand up for justice and human dignity. And Destiny, her heart full of pride and peace, understood that her journey had sparked a transformation far greater than herself, a transformation in the hearts and minds of everyone who heard her story. Thank you for following this meaningful journey. Through Destiny's eyes, we see that dignity and respect are always worth more than power or wealth. What about you? If you faced a moment like Destiny's, would you stay silent or rise up to fight for justice? Don't forget to like and share this video to spread its positive message to even more people. And be sure to subscribe so you won't miss the next inspiring story. Goodbye, and see you next time.